So it is 2 o'clock, folks, and I appreciate everyone's flexibility today. I want to thank everyone on the Zoom program today. We have 83, 84. So really excited about today. As many of you know, I host a podcast which will go into its second season sometime in February. So this is considered sort of a special it's sort of a special event that's kind of in the context of this No Box podcast, which is really to challenge one another to kind of think without those boundaries of a box. What's happening, particularly in education, both from a macro and micro point of view. So today, I appreciate everyone's participation. We have four remarkable panelists today. So this is sort of what I'm hoping is one of a number of special events around the podcast, particularly highlighting local and regional leaders, particularly in our area. And we'll start with four superintendents. So I'll introduce them by name, but the schedule today is going to go like this. And I've shared some information with our panelists already, so I'm going to give them a chance just in about 90 seconds each to introduce themselves, just a sort of a Reader's Digest version of who they are, the role that they're currently in, and sort of like how they arrived at the place that they're at today. And then there are some questions. There are some questions that I have for them in particular and four questions to be specific. So those of you who are counting how many questions are left, there are four questions, but there could be some follow-ups. And of course, we'll end the panel with an opportunity for some Q&A. So, we're scheduled, I think, for 90 minutes. Doesn't mean we're going to go 90 minutes. We figure about an hour, maybe a little over an hour. But of course, if the conversation is great and there's some really good back and forth with perhaps you, the audience, we'll let that go to a certain point. So the other thing I wanted to say today is that this is being recorded, and we'll be using parts of it as part of the podcast, but also perhaps on the No Box podcast Instagram page, etc. So just be aware of that as well. I've already let the panelists know, and they've agreed that that is okay with them. So with that being said, we've got Patrick Shelton, Superintendent of Edwardsville. So Patrick can kind of wave. Then we've got Todd Dugan, our Superintendent of Bunker Hill High School, and welcome, Todd. We have Jill Griffin, our very own Jill Griffin, who's also our trustee, one of our trustees, so one of my bosses, but also the Superintendent of Bethalto. And then Brad Tuttle, who is the Superintendent of Jerseyville High School. So I want to welcome all four of you today and just appreciate your generosity of time up front, and of course, the wisdom and knowledge that I know will come out of today's discussion. So with that being said, Patrick, in 90 seconds or less, my friend, talk to us a little bit about who you are and sort of how you've arrived to the place you're in today. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Ken, and welcome everybody. So again, Patrick Shelton, Superintendent at Edwardsville School District. I guess my 90-second version is I was a K-12 music teacher and K-12 in rural Staunton, which is where we lived for quite some time before we moved to Edwardsville, and then became a principal in Wood River, Hartford, went to Parkway School District in St. Louis County and spent 11 years in Missouri in different school and district leadership roles there, and really loved Missouri, loved a lot about it. That I didn't miss when I left Illinois, and said when I left Illinois I was never coming back. And lo and behold, 11 years later, just threw my hat in the ring for Edwardsville, is where we had moved from Staunton, where my kids went to school. And I thought, well, if there's any place you can have an impact, like is the place where your kids went to school. And so ended up coming here in 2021, and I'm in my third year as superintendent in Edwardsville, and glad to be back in Illinois.
Sorry, I'm muted. Thank you, Patrick. Great to have you. Todd.
Hi, everybody. My name's Todd Dugan, the proud superintendent of Bunker Hills Community Unit School District number 8. We are a small K-12 or pre-K through 12 district in rural Macoupin County, so just neighboring the Lewis and Clark and a part of the Lewis and Clark district. I grew up from Illinois, central Illinois, actually, outside of Atlanta, Illinois, small town, very similar to Bunker Hill. I grew up very much rural, working class from a family, and I learned at a very young age that those with less need to innovate more. And so that's kind of been my motivation to go into education. I spent 9 years as a teacher, 6 years as a principal, and 12 years now as superintendent here in Bunker Hill. So I guess I look surprisingly young for all those years, maybe not anymore. But anyway, I'm very happy to be here.
So Ken is gone, so I'm going to just take the lead here and go ahead and introduce myself. Jill Griffin. I'm the superintendent of Bethalto School District. This is my 8th year as superintendent here. Prior to that, I'm going to kind of go backwards. And prior to that, I was a central office administrator for 6 years, either as the assistant superintendent or director of curriculum. Prior to that, I was a principal for 5 years at Meadowbrook Intermediate. And then before that, I was a teacher in both Edwardsville School District and Bethalto School District. I taught elementary, and then I was a reading specialist. And so I think the thing that I'm the most proud of with our school district is this is where I graduated from. It's where my parents graduated from. And to Patrick Shelton's point earlier, my own kids go to school here. So homegrown and have a lot of hometown pride and love working and just supporting the school district in which I grew up, and excited to be here today. I think it's an honor to be asked. So thanks, Dr. Trzaska. My most recent, to your point earlier, my most recent role has been that of a board of trustee member for Lewis and Clark Community College since November of last year. And that has been an honor to serve, and it's been enlightening. And I feel like I've grown a lot, both as a leader and a board member. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you, Jill. Much appreciate. And last but not least, Brad, if you could talk to us a little bit.
Good afternoon. I'm Brad Tuttle. I'm in my 14th year as a superintendent, my 30th year in education. It's been a little different path. I spent some time at University of Illinois and at Kaskaskia Community College. Both in coaching roles, but teaching as well at Kaskaskia. But I've been a teacher, a principal, an assistant superintendent, and a superintendent in public schools. I'm originally from Southern Illinois. All 3 of my personal kids graduated from Jersey. I've been here. This is my 7th year. So you can do the math. Some of them were in high school when I moved here, which was challenging for them. I love Jersey County. It's Jersey 100 school district, so it's a county district. One of the things that we say is we're the 3rd largest landmass district in the state of Illinois. We go around the world every 6 days in buses, which is a challenge. I've had text messages about this evening since I've been on this Zoom call, and I will occasionally look down and probably have to deal with that. That's some of the hats that we try to figure out, as well as putting out something that's going to be possibly -20 on Tuesday, and most of us don't have classes on Monday. So we have a wide spectrum of our jobs, and I'm very passionate about workforce development, and I'm a community college graduate, so I love the opportunities that they give. Glad to be here, Ken.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, Jill, Todd, Brad, and Patrick. So let's go ahead and jump in. So I did give the panelists obviously some context, and so I'll do that here for our audience of 114. So it's so amazing to have you all on. So from my point of view, and again, this is sort of my opinion, sort of how I've sort of framed this sort of idea is, over time, as I've evolved as a leader, both being in the classroom, both being in leadership roles, being on that corporate side for a very, very short time, you know, the nature of education and what it has always been and what it, I think, is beginning to morph into is sort of beginning to clash a little bit. And so today, what I'm really asking the panelists to do is to talk a little bit about, perhaps a little bit about this indictment on education, both from a higher education perspective, but also from a K through 12 perspective. What are some of the changes that perhaps are coming down the pipeline, perhaps have arrived, and we're sort of grappling with those a little bit? So how do we, as this current generation of leaders, not only try to work through some of these changes and perhaps try to morph these changes into opportunities for our own respective institutions? Perhaps the other point of this is how are we teeing up that next generation of leaders, that next generation of Lewis and Clarks, that next generation of Bunker Hills, Jerseyvilles, Edwardsvilles, Bethaltos, Altons, et cetera, to really be able to thrive in what perhaps is coming next. And perhaps what is coming next is really focused on access. How are we continuing to broaden access in all that we do, both from a community college perspective, from a K through 12 perspective, and then even going beyond that in terms of access into opportunities within our own communities, whether that's, you know, to Brad, your point earlier, this sort of affinity with workforce. How are we aligning what we do with what the expectation is out there in the real world? So looking forward to the discussion today, and you know, just you know, have some fun, and let's sort of see where it goes. So my first question is, and we'll kind of start maybe from the opposite end of the spectrum. So we'll start with you, Brad. You know, and then just kind of talk us through your thoughts. So what is your first, kind of setting the tone? What is your priority in today's current environment? What is your priority as a superintendent?
Well, one of our jobs is to service our entire district, you know, and I, even though No Child Left Behind had some great qualities, it really changed the perspective of K-12. And I had a little hiatus in the middle of being K-12 because I was at Kaskaskia as a teacher, and then when I came back in to see, you know, what that had done to
Where's the fucking
high
lion?
school, what that had done to high schools had really driven kids to all go to four-year schools. And you know, since then, lately, we see this workforce problem that we have, really, and it's everywhere. And that is that's a driving force. I did this up when I was a superintendent in Sullivan in Central Illinois, and I've really put a priority on that. We have around 141 kids that's in some type of workforce internships. You know, we did a survey of our seniors, and it was interesting. I shared that with Ken earlier today, but you know, we still have a little under 50% that's saying they're going directly into a four-year school, but I have, you know, over a third of that other population that say they're either going to go straight into the workforce or they're going to get community college courses or degree and then go into the workforce. And so I think that's a trend that's changing for us. And to be frank, you know, if you have some skill set and you can get a little bit of maybe possible dual credit coursework while you're in high school, you can go right out and get a job because the jobs are just so available right now. We're seeing that even in schools, in that we're trying to grow our own, you know, lots of different versions of this to try to get people interested in being some type of K-12 employee. You're muted, Ken.
Sorry. Yeah, great points. You know, there was a article that came through the sort of listserv earlier this week around, to your point, around the point that 50% are looking essentially to go directly to a four-year school. I find that interesting in correlation to an article that was published by The Hill, which is out of DC, around really the concern that four-year institutions are having with those freshman classes becoming smaller and smaller. So there is this interesting tension between, I think, what we see in the data and that data from I mean, quite frankly, a ground level. I mean, this is the stuff that we're sending out to our students directly. I imagine getting pretty good results in terms of the responses. And then where those students from our area are really wanting to go. So I appreciate those insights, but before jumping any deeper, let's move over to Todd and hear kind of your thoughts, Todd, on that sort of priority that you have as a superintendent.
All right. Well, that's an excellent question. So, yeah, taking a different kind of approach to that question from a macro level, we look at our priority in Bunker Hill as basically caretakers of a community. And the ultimate goal, I guess, you would say like a developer of a soul or whatever. We try to take kids and the adults and make them create the conditions in which they will flourish to their fullest potential. So that goes hand in hand with all the research on growth mindset that unfortunately is just now really catching on because it's about 15 years too late since its emergence, but we embrace that fully. So I look at the priority as a superintendent of being the major point of creating the conditions within these schools that we hopefully are little miniature laboratories of innovation and growth gardens, if you will, for our future. So how we do that is we take it as our view is our job is to look at trajectories of our kids. We try to change those trajectories when they're heading somewhere that aren't desirable. And we also try to elevate trajectories for kids that are normally already on a positive direction. So whether that be bringing a kid that's far behind and catching them up, or taking a kid that's already ahead and making them even more advanced. And so that comes down to really two words, culture and climate, which is, I feel, the most important job of a district leader, because you can have all the strategies, innovations, funding, fiscal resources, tools, AI, licenses, software, you name it. You can have PLC teams all across the board. But if you don't have a climate in which your adults are feeling like they are wanting to grow or that they can grow, all of it is for naught. I believe the expression is like culture eats strategy for breakfast. All those strategies mean nothing if you don't have a culture, which again, I feel like that starts at the very top. And so that's one thing, like in Bunker Hill, one of the things that we do we can't offer massive retention bonuses or any kind of huge kind of fiscal perks, but however we can create a culture where everybody feels autonomous within the bounds of their job. So there's staff autonomy and there's also encouragement. So we do three things here. It doesn't require a single penny, which is never stand in the way of development, never pass up chance to praise, and never dismiss an idea, no matter who it's from. And so with that, I guess bottom line is we create a floor for our kids, staff, which is the minimum level of expectation, and we destroy the ceilings.
Thank you, Todd. Thank you. Patrick, want to follow that, and then we'll bring it over to Jill. So.
Yeah, I'll actually piggyback on both Brad and Todd. We're doing a lot with workforce development, with readiness. One of the statistics I saw the other day was that 35% of students who enter a four-year university do not end up graduating from that four-year university. And so we talk about the 50% or 70% that are looking into higher ed, but if we're not getting them through that pathway, we're not being successful at the end of the day. And I'm from the generation that Brad talked about from NCLB, where everybody pushed going to college. It's what you did. And unfortunately, right now, I think in our communities, we have a lot of our parents that are still pushing that because that's what they experienced. They experienced it's important to go to college. It's important to get a degree. It's important to move forward. And so what that's done is it's depleted some areas of our workforce. And so a lot of the conversations we've had is how do we expose students to areas that they might not otherwise be exposed to? and get them experiences and education that will, I'll call it, wet their whistle, so that when they get to a point that they're ready for whatever that next step is for them outside of post-secondary, they can be successful in that. And we're giving them the foundation to do that.
Thank you so much, Patrick. Appreciate that. And Jill.
I'm sorry. I just had a couple visitors. We had a former student come to my door who wanted to say hi, and all that chaos was, I apologize for that. I wasn't being rude to my panelists that were speaking at that time. So I think a priority for me right now in our district right now, looking at it more a little bit differently, is we're in the second year of implementing what we're calling a professional learning community. It's a common term among educators, and we're implementing it very tightly. And it's a strategic process where the adults are basically the lead learners within the organization, and putting our own practice under review, being focused on student outcomes and analyzing our data to determine what skills and instructional strategies are working and making students successful here. And so that is a significant focus for us right now. It's something that we're really working on and understanding as the adult learners in a professional learning community, that learning and teaching and learning doesn't happen in a vacuum, and that it's becoming a part of this collaborative process here and unpacking our students' standards and creating common formative assessments that's going to help drive the culture and climate here, and how we support our staff. And I think we all know that it's important to support our staff so they in turn can support our students. And so if you're asking me like what our priority is, it's that right now. And I have been guilty in the past of not being as hyper focused on something as what I need to be. I tend to have my foot in a lot of different things. And so one thing I feel like I've learned over the last 8 years is to be more focused and to really align efforts. And so this aligns with our strategic plan as a school district, which in turn aligns with our school improvement plans. And it's something that we're facilitating across the district, and we're doing it at every level. And it's something that we're spending time on. We're investing a lot of ESSER funds. And I would say it pivots right into the culture and climate that we're trying to build here, which is also a priority. And that's being a district that people want to be a part of. People are excited to join. And we have a group of people that meet every couple months. We're surveying our staff pre and post. We're doing stay interviews, exit interviews, and really trying to cultivate something here that people want to be a part of. And I'd say those are my priorities right now. And clearly I need to turn off my iMessage. So I'm going to get it together here, Ken, I promise.
No, it's all good. Thank you. Thank you all for that. I think, as we move to this second question, obviously, I like to hear the conversation around culture. I think to the point you made, Todd, as well, is that culture eats strategy for lunch it eats it for every meal, really. And so I think, a lot of folks on this call today who are part of the LC team probably know that about me pretty clearly, is that culture is everything. If we have a good culture and we're continuing to better that culture every day, then that's providing opportunities for us to better that experience for our students, to better that experience that we have with each other, because I think that's a dynamic that's often lost. We might be the team member who pulls in over in lot A and gets there at 8 o'clock and leaves at 4 o'clock, and never really crosses paths with a team member who pulls in the lot C at 10 o'clock and leaves at 2 o'clock, and 15 years goes by, and it's like, my gosh, Ken, I don't think we've ever met, or I may have seen you on a Zoom call here and there, but it's great to meet you. So I think as we try to connect our team members respectfully and respectively across our organizations, I think that brings us closer to having a measurable impact on the students that we serve. And then, of course, those students, I believe, can bring that energy home and back into the communities. And that sort of circles back, I think, to your point, Jill, as well, that, this is about creating environments. And I think, from obviously I've gotten to know Patrick quite a bit as well, and Todd and all of you, but you're trying to create these environments where people want to thrive and work and be a part of, rather than just a place where, hey, yeah, I've got to get to work on Tuesday, but I'll get out of there as soon as I can, versus, hey, I've got to get to work on Tuesday, and when I finish what I started that day, I'll get back to you, so to speak. So some really interesting stuff that kind of brings me, and it shifts tones a little bit with this next question. Because for me, the bigger context of this is how do we take on these challenges that perhaps are in front of us? Because we all want to create amazing and remarkable and memorable and meaningful and I think consistent cultures. I mean, that's vital to our overall survival, but our ability to thrive as institutions. So as we begin to think about that, as we're looking at the data, right, we're looking at, this sort of, as we've heard over the years, the demographic cliff, right, the birth rates are going down. And I think that's projected to extend through 2035 or something, where we're going to continue to see these declines across the country, and I think the biggest impact will be in a lot of our rural schools that we serve. So you have these sort of signals coming at us, right? Like, population decline and demographics and how are students, I mean, where the students where are they going to come from, right? I have some theory on that I'll share later on. But with that context, what do you notice as a superintendent getting in the way of a more purposeful, I guess, a more purposeful progress as leaders in education? And also just as organizations. So let me repeat that one more time so everyone in the crowd can hear it as well. What do you notice is getting in the way of more purposeful progress as leaders, both in education and also within our own organization? So kind of a micro and a macro point of view in terms of what you feel might be getting in the way. And this time, I'm going to throw it in the middle. We're going to start with Todd, go over to Patrick, Jill, and then end up with Brad. So Todd, and then Patrick, you'll follow Todd.
Well, that's a great question too. So I feel like in rural areas, first of all, if any of you are from a rural area, you know that there is one thing that rural communities love, which is traditions. And ironically, some of the traditions, or at least, and not all, but many traditions, rigid structures, or expectations based on the past. Those are three of the things I feel are standing in our way. A few examples there would be harkening back to the No Child Left Behind era. There was a big push and measure on test scores, reading and math, and that was all that mattered. And in our district, we are very proud that our survey of 3rd through 12th graders showed us that 96% of the students in 3 through 12 had at least one friend. 96%. 93% said that there was an adult affiliated with the school that cared about them. That is huge. You can have the highest test scores around, and what good does that do you when you're struggling to get your kid to come to school? If the kid does not want to be there in a school, what good are those rankings? So there's just one small example right there of past expectations. Another one is like during COVID-19 pandemic, we took and embraced that flexibility. We were doing synchronous, asynchronous, hybrid, in-person, completely remote. We did all of those things. And while we didn't do some as well as others, by and large, there were some great successes. And now that we're all back to in-person, predominantly, we have continued to take advantage of some of that flexibility. We know that it can be done. For example, just last year, we took some work-based learning students and we created a section that could go to Lewis and Clark to get some certification. We transported, we paid, and in a small high school, you think, how does that work with the high school schedule? How can they get their required courses? Well, it was easy. Google Classroom, we did asynchronous, synchronous. If a child started getting behind, we would just say, you need to start doing asynchronous or synchronous work. And then we gave them chances, just like the traditional old work co-op program. And finally, another one is that, of course, all schools struggle with it, is that compliance from the state, because all the research too says compliance can stifle innovation to no end. And so one of the things that when we collaborate in our area between Macoupin and Madison County superintendents, we like to collaborate a lot and fiscally responsible to share resources. Every once in a while, you will run into a area where the focus is on compliance above all else, and that's a struggle. In fact, I remember having a discussion with one colleague and saying, when we had added, for example, small Bunker Hill, 1,600 kids, right? We are the first ones in this area with a small high school. We offered boys volleyball. All right. And you think, why would you do that in a predominantly rural community? Well, we took the research, and the research says you take a kid that's involved in nothing and you involve them in one thing. And that movement is the equation of moving from an F to an A academic outcome wise. So again, a kid that's involved in nothing, you get them involved in one activity that moves them from an F to an A. You take a kid that's in two activities and you add 3 or 4, it does nothing. And that's been proven numerically over and over. So why would we add boys football and all these other activities? We offered something that kids that wanted to be a part of. And as a result, we do things differently. So that's kind of how we've encountered and overcome that expectation of past experiences.
Thank you, Todd. That was great insights on that. So if I were to kind of put a, almost like a bow on all of that you said, I mean, essentially what may get in the way of us being able to move forward as institutions is being able to acknowledge the fact that, this idea of participation, this idea of listening to kind of the pulse of the organization, what a student wants, or what a parent, and a student and a teacher through a conversation realizes could be a great value to help elevate that student's experience. So for example, adding volleyball or adding something else. But I guess the point is participation. So is there a lack of participation? Maybe a quick follow. Do you see a lack of engagement or participation from those that you serve that kind of have led you to that sort of idea that, hey, we really need to do more that's relevant to our students and to our extended population of support? Because I think you started off by talking about kind of that advocacy piece, like if there's a person out there, I mean, I even think that extends to our work. I mean, having individuals on our campus that are really there. I mean, everybody in part, in my opinion, is an extension of that support system for each student as individuals, but outside, when there isn't that support system, those students are ultimately bringing that sort of pain or whatever you want to call it to campus. So I guess back to my point too is, do you see this lack of advocacy or this lack of true engagement or participation from across the board as being something that we have to get our arms around, both from a K through 12 perspective, but even with your own insights to a higher education culture? Like just
I think that's a great point. And I think the lesson to us leaders is to pay attention where that participation is going down and where it's needed. For example, it's no secret, football has been declining nationwide. High school football has been declining nationwide across the state. Well, in a town of 1,600, they struggled to fill a football team. And they weren't doing very well. And they had tried to co-op with another school to still hang on to football. And a lot of the reason was because the parents, or the older generation enjoyed coming back to Bunker Hill for Friday Night Lights. The kids not all kids, but many kids did not want to play. They were only doing it because of their parents. So we took a look at so what we basically did was we looked at an opportunity. We said, okay, we're going to go with the neighboring district, Staunton. They're going to host the football. We're going to host the boys volleyball, and then Staunton kids come over here. So that was a creative solution. So it wasn't necessarily a decline in participation. It was a decline in one area and an interest in the other. And to think that I'm in Bunker Hill and I survived getting rid of football and adding boys volleyball. I mean, there we go.
There you go. Thanks, Todd.
I would add to that, Ken. I know it's
ahead.
one to Patrick, but I would just add to that. It's actually a strategic goal here as well, because I think Dugan brings up a great point, and that's that we have to find ways to creatively engage our students. And one of our goals is to increase extended learning opportunities for our students by 50%. And we measure that by rosters of our clubs and our activities. And it's outside of athletics. And I think Dugan did a great job of bringing up an athletic example, but I know him well. And I know that he has many other opportunities. And that's something that we're doing right now as well, really trying to increase the number of field trips and increasing the number of clubs and activities outside of the school day. And we're measuring that through our 5 essential survey data and trying to really increase those opportunities for our kiddos, because we know, and I know he touched on this already, but we know if kids are engaged in school and they feel a sense of belonging beyond the classroom, the walls of the classroom, they're going to be more likely to graduate. They're going to be more likely to be successful and find success. And so I know, and I didn't want to interrupt, but that is literally something we're working on in our district. And I find myself every month being proud, because each month I have teachers in our district who are volunteering their time to bring forward a debate club. At the middle school, they just added another art club, or they added an art club. They added a newspaper, and they're bringing forth all of these opportunities, and they're doing it on their own to engage our students beyond the school day. And it's something that we're working at a district level, and we're kind of seeing it trickle down. And so when he said that, it made me think about some things that we're working on. And I think he brings up a great point about how we can engage kids beyond the walls of the classroom and thinking bigger. So I'm sorry, Patrick Shelton.
All right, Jill, you took my time again. It's okay. Nope, no worries. Jill and I have known each other a long time, so she can talk in front of me anytime. It's fine. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit, but I will talk about, Todd mentioned relevancy. And I think one of the things that we're seeing more and more with kids is if they don't understand the relevancy of what's going on in a classroom, in an extra, whatever it is, they're not going to engage in that work. And I think that speaks to some of the data that Todd talked about. One of the things I heard several years ago was coming out of COVID, that if we as organizations haven't changed what we do and taken an opportunity to reevaluate, we've missed a window of opportunity. And coming out of COVID, I think we had communities and parents and kids and teachers that wanted two different things. One wanted to go back to the way things used to be because that worked for them. And one did not want to go back to the way things used to be because all of a sudden they discovered something that worked differently for them. Because in public schools, and I know you all experience this well, time is the construct we can't control. And from an organizational standpoint, we talk a lot about the school year being our time. We have 176 days. We have 180 days with teachers. It's very difficult to get outside of that. And so what we end up doing is we end up either putting off change or cramming change into a time that's not amenable to that change actually taking place. And so that's something that we've talked a lot about, and I don't want to get into CBE because I'll get Ken going on CBE stuff, but I also think there's some validity there, because what we saw during COVID was kids didn't have a 7-hour day. They didn't have a 54-minute class, but some kids were successful in that environment. Not all kids, but all kids weren't being successful in the environment before. So as we look at what we learned from COVID and what we saw in classrooms, what we learned from virtual instruction, how can we use those opportunities to then provide every single student with what they need to be successful? And I think all my colleagues would agree that public schools were developed and as recently as prior to COVID, we're not meeting the needs of every single student. We hit the middle. And so what do we need to do to challenge students on the upper end and make sure that we're continually growing kids? Also then finding ways to not let time be the variable, so that the students who need more time, who need more exposure, have the opportunity to do that, which means we have to talk about, how do we take the school day and not make it an 8 to 3:30 day? How do we start earlier? How do we provide more time later? How do we look outside the box of intervention? One of the things that we did 2 years ago in Edwardsville that continues to grow is we've started virtual intervention during the summer months. So instead of going to a summer reading program at a school, we have some people that do it virtually with students. And so what it takes out is if you go on vacation, it's okay. You can still jump in to your virtual intervention. If for some reason your parent doesn't have transportation, you can still jump into your virtual intervention. Obviously, that comes with other kinds of challenges, because the students who probably are going to benefit the most from intervention are younger learners. So they're less self-motivated, less self-starters. But at the same time, what can we take from that and learn at the upper grades, where we start to talk about algebra failures and students who are missing credits at the high school level and all the things that go with that. So I think really looking at time as what can we do about that from an organizational standpoint and from an individual student standpoint.
Yeah. So before, thank you, Patrick. So before we jump over to Jill, I remember through most of my career, I would always hear from those leaders around me that, we just can't be everything to everyone. We have to, even to your point, Jill, a little bit of a different context to focus, but let's just focus on doing really well with, one could argue, this population of students or this program. Or we really can't be that flexible with this policy because, and there was really never like a sound logic for that, because it was just, but I was always on those fringes saying, well, no, we have to find the balance to be everything to everybody in the best possible way we can. And as I've evolved personally, and I think as the institutions that I've been part of, I think as we've all evolved together, there's been this acknowledgement that yes, we have to be everything to everyone. We're not always going to get it right every single time, but that's where I think, going back to what I've heard so far, is we have to listen to our students. We have to really be engaged with kind of where they are in their own experience, because there are lots of variables that go into a student's experience, whether that's from a mental health perspective, whether that's from a safety perspective, whether that's from a food insecurity perspective, whether that's from just what the heck is going on outside of this environment for me perspective that oftentimes we don't know about. And then how do we create those environments on our own campuses, whether it's a college campus, a high school campus, a K through, a junior high school campus, I'm just calling them campuses, or environments to be more ready. So there's sort of readiness. How do we become more ready to take on these sort of shifts that need to happen? Of course, I can't go without saying I love the idea of reimagining how time can define the experience. Obviously, competency-based ed. I've talked to some superintendents over the last month, and I'm, outside the state of Illinois, and I'm trying to challenge, even from a K through 12 level, to start thinking about, a time, less of a time-bound perspective when it comes to education. It doesn't mean it's for everyone. I think, one of the best maybe sort of examples I've heard of this is, creating our own experiences, whether it's, hey, the senior year experience is going to have a bunch of on and off ramps in it. We're going to try to find the experience that works best for you. It's the same thing with our programs. We might have a program that I take 2 years to do, but Todd's like, man, I can get this done in a year. Because even talking to students, well, Josh, it's going to take me 2 years. It's going to take me 4 years. And perhaps that's one of the reasons why, again, I love all my four-year university friends and colleagues out there, but maybe from that perspective, they're also looking at it wrong, where, we're trying to get students in, but maybe students don't want to be there for 4 years. And to your point, Patrick, earlier, I think the number was 35%. I think I wrote it down, 35% of students who start at a university don't finish. I mean, that's huge, so anyway, so just you got me rolling there for a second, so I just wanted to throw it out there. Maybe it'll be a good sound bite or something, but thank you for that. And Jill, let's end with you, and then we'll move on to the third question. So thank you again. So Jill, it's all you.
So you both kind of stole my thunder with this idea of time being something that stands in our way. I was with you, Ken, and you really opened my eyes to this a lot just since serving on the board with the idea of competency-based education. And so I don't want to be redundant. I'm going to try to pivot here and kind of think about in terms of things that get in our way of purposeful progress in education. And I would say that what I noticed getting in the way of purposeful progress is unfortunately what happens in Springfield often. And I know Todd kind of touched on this, but I think a lot in terms of what's happening with legislation. Recently on December 1st, myself and actually a superintendent on the phone, Brad Skirtage, we co-hosted a legislative panel in our region with local legislators to discuss with them the issues that we face in public education and how we need to be partners in this process. And we need to be able to have open dialogue and communication and the ramifications of some of their decisions that I'm not sure they often think about when they implement those types of changes. And one of those recent changes that I know has had a significant impact and we've all been talking about is the requirement of 2 years of foreign language, and how, that sounds great in theory, but for one, we have educator shortages. So to find a foreign language teacher is very challenging right now. Then you couple that with the fact that, say, my son who's in Spanish 4 and it's a dual credit course, Bethalto would no longer be able to offer Spanish 3 and 4 because I only have 2 Spanish teachers. So now you're going to mandate all students take Spanish 1 and 2, pulling those resources away from the students who truly want to be in those classrooms. I think a strong argument could be made that not everybody needs to take Spanish based on their particular where they want to go, whatever their next is. And so, you know, what we find, and I'm involved in the Vision 2030 group at the state level as well. And what we keep finding is that sometimes the decisions that they're making that are maybe best for the districts north of I-80 don't always work for this part of the state. And we're really struggling to communicate that and keep those lines of communication open with our legislators so that they can help be our partner in this and help them understand how these decisions impact us locally. And taking that a step further, helping, I did ask, where did that come from? And apparently that decision came out of the fact that we had students in Illinois, and I do believe this was in the colored counties, who were not eligible to go to the University of Illinois because they didn't have 2 years of foreign language. I believe they're the only college or the only institution that requires that. And so we had students that wanted to go to U of I, weren't eligible to go to U of I because they didn't have that 2-year requirement. And I would just say our counselors do a fantastic job in our school district of guiding our students towards whatever their next is going to be, whether they're going into the workforce, whether they're going to go into the trades, or if they are going on to a community college or a 4-year institution. And so that to me is, that's a district issue. But it became an issue for all of us because those legislators decided, or a legislator decided to champion that cause. And now we're all kind of dealing with the ramifications of it. So really trying to understand that idea of local control and helping us, and I don't want to get on any kind of political diatribe here, but I do feel like it's important. And it's something when you talk about what we face, that is something that we face as school districts, is trying to navigate the challenges that are sometimes placed in front of us that we have no control over. And so really opening those lines of communication and helping our legislators understand. I know Amy Ellick is working on a bill now to try to help us navigate this 2-year requirement where kids can take CTE courses. But I'm looking on the line here, Travis Jumpers on this call. I'm going to have kids that potentially don't take welding now because they have to take 2 years of Spanish. And so there's all kinds of ramifications for those types of decisions that sometimes aren't always thought through. And so for us, I think one of the things that I've learned in the last 8 years, and I've learned it from some of my colleagues, is the importance of advocacy and really reaching out that olive branch and extending an olive branch to those legislators and helping them understand how that decision impacts Bethalto, how it impacts Edwardsville, and how it impacts Bunker Hill. So that would be something that I would say is an obstacle or a challenge outside of time. Like I said, I had to kind of pivot on that one.
Yeah, no, thank you, Jill. I think we could have an entire 2-hour discussion on legislative, just legislative stuff. I don't know how else to say it. I know one of the challenges that we as the president group, and it's not a challenge as so much it is just continuing to sort of press on the issues of how do we really rebuild and rethink what dual credit is? It's a good thing, but also there are some vulnerabilities from our perspective. How do we keep building upon it? I know all of you at some level have now students participating in concurrent enrollment at Lewis and Clark. But when we talk about dual credit, oftentimes it was around credentialing. It was around, mixed classes are on, mixed classes are off. And, dual credit looks very different in a rural school, like a Staunton or a Gillespie, or even arguably a Bunker Hill than it would, say, an Alton or a Jerseyville or an Edwardsville. So, I think there's a lot of opportunity there that links back to your point around legislative knowledge and understanding as to how these policies and practices, which in a lot of ways have existed forever, without much sort of addressing of the nuances that don't make them as effective as they possibly could be. And that's a lot of worm cans open now, but it's something I think that's worthy of perhaps a follow-up. So with that being said, third question is, what are you most, kind of shifting tone maybe a little bit, what are you most excited about
Kim,
And
you want me to
Oh.
answer too?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Geez, Brad. Yeah, please do. Yeah, please answer. That was my.
No. I'm going to give a little broader.
Yeah.
I agree with everyone, including, some of the things that you had to say. I'm going to say change, because whether it be teaching strategies, new curriculum, any of those kinds of things that we're trying to move forward on. And I'm going to connect it with what Jill had to say there is our mandates, whether it be Spanish or whatever, our graduation requirements, unless those kids are on track and doing really well, their senior year, we give them some flexibility to be able to do some of this congruent, enrollment and some different things where we're fighting those mandates to try to get those freshmen, sophomores, and juniors on track to graduate. I also would have to say that a big challenge that I feel is the collaboration approach that we need to have with not just educators and parents, but with the lawmakers and the community members that aren't parents. That's a big challenge. And as a community college, I feel like it's a major challenge for you to get us all just talking the same, language and trying to come up with the same, goals and things like that. And I would agree, I'm going to go a little deep with what Todd had to say, and that I think my first word was just dealing with change. We did 2 media centers with 2 esports, just really neat areas in both of these media centers with media specialists instead of librarians in there. And in both our middle school and our high school, we're getting 100 kids to try out for these things. And football's not going anywhere in Jersey because we love our football. But I feel like that for a long time, we were not giving a lot of other students some of these opportunities that they're going to love forever. And I'll leave it at that.
That's great points. Great points, Brad. And sorry about that. To your point about, I'm going to pull this out. You didn't say this exactly, but it's this sort of advocacy for one another, and how are we sharing these best practices, or one could argue better practices, across our own environments, both internally, externally. I see today we have a good number of community members on the call, and perhaps we'll have some questions from them. But I think there's this opportunity for us to really extend ourselves even more in how we're trying to create this next generation of what education. Maybe we just focus, and maybe that's to your point, Jill. Maybe it's our region, our communities. What can we do to reimagine a model that's going to take perhaps other states, other communities to that higher level they need to get to? So in that regard, it's all, at least in me, the way that sometimes I'm wired at times more than others, is let's lead the damn way. Let's make things happen, because I think just from what we've heard in 2.5-ish questions here, there's some amazing opportunities for all of us to be working even deeper on some of these issues. So with that being said, this third question, and why don't we do this, Brett? We're going to start with you, my friend. All right. We're going to start with you. What are you most excited about and most worried about when it comes to your work as leaders?
Mike, is this me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You broke up there just a second. I would say, our challenges is having a safe environment for all of our buildings and all of our kids, and the challenges of just teacher recruitment, budget constraints, following all these, as Jill brought, it's certainly something I had in my notes to bring up 2 or 3 times on the legislators and not understanding what mandates do to certain areas of the state. We're a very diverse state. I say sometimes it's kind of like being in the United States. We have everything that the entire United States has in Illinois. I'm probably most excited about, I'm pretty passionate about workforce development And we've got some really neat things going on. We've got a lot of community members, just having, 31 internships that are right here in Jersey is really been a success story over really a 2-year period, getting that many. That's running separate from our entrepreneur class that we do as well, that runs in the morning. And then I would also say that I developed in an area that used to be a counseling area in both middle school and high school since I've been here. We call it the Learning Lab, but it really has interventions for academics, behavioral, and social emotional. And just some quick statistics. Last year, we had in our high school, we had 5,391 referrals that went in and out of that lab. And this year we're on pace for very similar. We have 2,111 that are going in there for all these things. That's not crowding my attendance office, where there's discipline. There may end up in there with discipline, but I just really feel like that it is tackling a lot of the things that kids drag to school. And we're really proud of that. And we're doing a great job of it. And so I thought I would brag on that a little bit.
Thank you, Brad. It's good stuff. Jill, why don't we jump over to you this time? So if you don't mind going second, thanks. Then we'll go to Patrick, and then we'll end up with Todd with this question. Thanks.
So I think my greatest concern right now, and I think all four of us will say this, but it's just the workforce within every job category, whether it's teachers, bus drivers, doesn't matter. We're short staffed in every single category right now. And just what that means and what the data is suggesting as far as where we go from here. And so that is my greatest concern, is how to develop the workforce and how to really entice people to come into education. When we kind of have a black eye right now in the public, I feel like since the pandemic, public education, and Ken, you alluded to this earlier, we all kind of have a black eye right now. And we're trying to come back from that. And so really enticing people to come into this field when it's not necessarily popular right now. And so I'll pivot from that into what I think I'm most excited about within the workforce development, which is our Grow Your Own program. And I think all of us have a Grow Your Own program, and ours is a teacher prep program, and it's led by Angie Nielsen in our school district. She's a fantastic teacher within the CTE department. And we actually this year employed our first graduate who was a Grow Your Own student, and she's now a special education teacher. And so she and I work closely together. We go over there and we do mock interview work with them. I am so sorry. I have tried turning it off and it won't. And we have a power outage at one of our buildings, but this is the life we live. So I don't know what to tell you. I'm just going to have to, you're going to have to live with my dings. I'm sorry. But our Grow Your Own program with our teacher preparation with our students is going really, really well. We continue to see an increase in the number of students who are participating, and I couldn't be more proud of the work that we're doing. And I think one of the things that Angie's done that I think is a little bit different, and I think we presented 2 months ago to all these a lot of area school districts who are in this. It was I think it was through CTE, but it's basically we're pushing kids out into classrooms way earlier on than what they have historically done. And even I was thinking back into my own experience when I was in school, I didn't get to go inside a classroom until I believe my junior year, where I taught junior achievement. So the whole reason that we go into education is because we're passionate about kids. We love kids, but yet the previous model, we weren't allowed to see kids and interact with kids until much later on in our program. And so now what we're doing is we're introducing our kids to oh my goodness,
It's all good. It's the nature of the work, right? So
oh my gosh, and I've turned it off. I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but anyway, introducing our students who are in high school to our pre-K and our elementary and middle school, and giving them all kinds of opportunities. I have students job shadow me who think they want to be a superintendent, our students who want to be administrators, and we just really embrace them in our school district. Our teachers embrace them, and we administrators do, and they follow us around, and we're doing job embedded type of you know, job shadowing and things like that. So it's been a really great experience. And I think Angie is from Bethalto. She's really passionate about it. She tries to talk everyone into going into education. And so we've seen a lot of benefits from that. I'm going to mute now.
Oh, good. Thank you, Jill. Thank you. Thank you. So Patrick, let's jump over to you and then we'll wrap this question up with Todd.
Absolutely. Yeah, I want to start with the things I'm excited about because I think we're seeing some new people coming into public education that are not your traditional teacher. I think the past 2 years, we have several teachers who have come from other fields that are leaving those fields and coming into education. And they're coming in with a new enthusiasm and bringing just a new perspective to education. I have a third grade teaching wife and a third grade teaching daughter. And so so I hear a lot about third grade and what goes on. And so I know that a lot of our teachers are feeling defeated, beat down. I'm sure you all have experienced that as well. But I do think there's starting to be a renewed sense of purpose and thinking about coming out of COVID, an excitement about what's going on in schools and for schools. The other thing I'm really excited about is I think public education right now is one of the best spaces ever to innovate. And you're hearing themes of that as we talk about workforce development, grow your own programs, things with technology, esports, all those things are things that are in response to a student need. And I think we're seeing a lot more of that as years go by. So I think it's just a great place for innovation. And I think everybody's focus is really turning towards meeting the needs of each individual student. And so it's requiring us to think differently as leaders. I know it's requiring our teachers to think differently as they think about the students in their classroom. And we're getting to build systems behind the scenes of intervention, of support for kids that helps them be successful. So those are my two exciting things. One of the things that worries me most is the continued impact of COVID. And I'm going to take learning off the table because I'm not concerned about the learning impact, because I think those things we can eventually work through and catch up and intervene. I'm worried about the social emotional learning component that's come from COVID, because we're seeing gaps in students in the ways they interact with people that they would have developmentally learned when they were in a classroom. And so a lot of that is, how you engage in meaningful conflict, how you disagree with somebody, how it's okay that we agree different things. And so I think we're seeing some of that out in our communities as well, which is then now feeding what happens in school. So there's a lot of I don't have to like you and I don't have to respect you because we don't believe the same thing. And so we've got to figure out how to get that back into play, where we understand how to work nice and play together, the things we learned in kindergarten that all of a sudden are starting to become missing. And the other thing that's really starting to concern me from more of a longitudinal standpoint is our attendance data. And I think probably every superintendent on the call is struggling with attendance at some level and has been since COVID, but we've never seen that bounce back. And so the importance of being in a classroom is no longer there for families and we hear a lot of well, it's okay that we went to Disney because we were building memories. Well, while you're building memories, we were teaching phonemes, and so now your child doesn't know vowel consonant blends or whatever it is. And so being able to try to help our community, our parents, understand the importance. And then as a public entity with very little resources as it comes to pursuing truancy, how do we then start to respond to that? Because I will tell you, the vast majority of students not being successful in our schools are the ones who are not here on a regular basis. And so that becomes a challenge that is outside of our locus of control as much as we try to make it so. And then all the other things that everybody has talked about are concerns as well. And I'll tag Todd.
So one of the things that excites me the most is looking at some of what the future entails as far as technology. And I know there will be people that will say AI scares them, and there are sides to it that could potentially be scary if misused or whatever. But what we've done at Bunker Hill is that we've started crafting our guidelines for students in 9 through 12 with parent permission to use it with the teachers' even help. So I feel like we're going to go from a point where students, to be successful, are going to have to be what's the right word? Connoisseur, I guess. So I have to know what a good AI use is versus a bad AI use. So why that excites me is being from a rural background. When the Chromebooks came out way back in 2012, I believe, 2009 possibly, we were piloting those in a small rural K-8 district of 100 kids because it was like, wow, this is the truly disruption to these barriers for rural kids. If we cannot take a field trip, we can do the next best thing is we can go to the pyramids of Egypt through Google Cardboard or through Chromebooks, and it gets people excited about learning. We've now advanced to the point we have Eduverse VR headsets in class in our Flex Lab, and it just gets kids excited. Sorry, I'm also recovering here. So that gets me excited because that's going to level access for everybody. It does not, I mean, one thing the pandemic did show us too, these wide open spaces out in like Jersey and Bunker Hill, they don't look so bad when you can work from home. So there's not necessarily that need anymore to pursue a large urban setting for the same access to opportunities. With Google Classroom, with all kinds of other options, we've been able to like minimize those gaps. So that is exciting for me. Also about the mandates, I mean, I'm not excited about mandates, obviously, but I kind of I frame that as I look, and I guess that's just a new mindset from myself. Is I kind of thought about the mandates this last summer, and I thought, well, we're never going to probably be able to stop having new mandates that have detrimental effects. However, I've just kind of learned to accept it as a compliment. Like, why do public schools get so many mandates every year? Why? Because I think that shows that they know public schools can get it done, right? They wouldn't make these mandates for, medical fields and all these other professions, not to knock them, but they know public ed can get it done. And I think we do get it done. And so I take it as a moment of pride. The only thing that really worries about me are two, well, there's maybe a couple, but I don't want to be on a panel talk about the state of education and be all grouchy and gloomy. There's a couple things that worry me. Yeah, social media use. And you say, oh, by kids making threats? No, it is not from the kids at all. Social media use is from the adults 9 times out of 10. I don't know how many times I go to a basketball game in Bunker Hill and people come up to me and they're looking for the litter boxes in the bathroom that they've seen on Facebook, and they don't exist. I tell them you got to go to Jerseyville to find those. No, I'm just kidding, Brad. So the social media use does worry me a bit. And then I also worry a little bit about the lack of interest in going into education. When people are going to see very young, healthy looking superintendents like Brad Tuttle. Sorry, there's a compliment for you, Brad. So when you see somebody very young and healthy looking like Brad retire shortly, how does a 20-year-old reconcile that, knowing that they've got 47 years in the field ahead of them until they're 62? That's going to be tough. So those are the only two things that worry about me. But other than that, I think it's all surmountable.
Todd, you don't have to feel guilty because you're attacking us.
I'm on audio now. I'm trying to get back on video. I apologize. So thank you for that, Todd. I think there's a lot to unravel there when it comes to sort of, I think, how the impact of social media has influenced or could put pressure on or could ultimately contend with really the cultures I think that all of us respectively are trying to build on our own campuses, essentially trying to create those spaces where learning and engagement can happen in a constructive way. So I do appreciate you sharing those insights. So with that being said, folks, I'm gonna move to this final question, and then sort of just a little Q&A. I know we're a little over. I thought where we would be, but that's okay. So this is a little bit more of a loaded question, and I know I shared this a little bit with you already. And it kind of goes off of this idea of what really worries us, of where education is going from a higher ed perspective, particularly, but perhaps there's a little bit of leaning into sort of the needs that need to be happening on the K through 12 level. So we hear a lot about problems in higher ed. We hear about it probably every week if you dig enough, where colleges are closing or colleges particularly are struggling to find sort of that stability again that they once had, and even from a from a high school perspective, you know, what's happening within that curricula area, what's happening within that workforce development perspective area. So what I'm going to ask all of you is, again, very open-ended. I know you've been prompted on this. So with all of this noise that we seem to hear around education, and Jill, you alluded to it, this sort of like we're really under this sort of I don't know, this level of scrutiny as educational entities at whatever level we're at. So in a very open-ended way, what the heck is going on in education today? And what are you, a superintendent at your respective school, going to do about it? So let's start with Jill. I want to start with you, and then we'll move our way down. And I'm going to try to jump on video as quickly as I can.
So I think what's going on right now is a lot of what we're seeing in society is just manifesting itself in our schools. And so whether that's the political climate right now, what we're seeing as far as people behaving badly, I think we're just, I don't want to get into any kind of details, but I think to think about what I'm going to do about it, Dr. Trzaska, or what I am doing about it, I think it's important for us as district leaders, community leaders, is to advocate and to walk the walk and do whatever we can to engage and provide support and opportunities for engagement for our students, our families, and our community. I think we have to engage on a different level, and that's something I'm trying to work on personally. I do serve on, and this isn't, I don't want this to come across the wrong way, but I do serve on multiple boards and statewide committees because I think it's important for us as leaders. We have a voice, we have a platform already. So I think it's important for us to look for opportunities to lead beyond Bethalto School District and beyond my own community, but having a greater impact on what's happening around education and making people, joining people and bringing them to the conversation. Things like today. I mean, honestly, I think this is great. I love that we're having this conversation. I love that you're challenging us to think. And I love that we're having dialogue around difficult topics. And so I think it's important for us as district leaders to advocate, to be invested and involved. And I think the last thing that I would say that I do is I really encourage others to do the same. I think there's power in numbers, and I think we can sit back and Dugan, thank you for calling me out. I do need to be more positive about legislation sometimes. Todd and I are great friends, so that's where that came from.
No, I wasn't talking about anybody in particular.
Oh, you were talking about me. I know you were. Anyway, I'm just kidding. I encourage others to do the same. And I think that there's power in numbers. And I think we can sit back and we can complain about the problem, or we can be a part of the solution. And so that's how I look at it. I just try to be a part of that solution and find opportunities to where I can have a meaningful impact. So that would be how I would.
Thanks. Yeah. So thank you for that. So why don't we go to Todd and then Brad and then Patrick, we'll go ahead and end with you. So Todd, what are your thoughts on this last question?
The last question is, I think, what is happening right now? I think it is tough for people to go back to the old ways of recognizing that 5 instructional seat hours of sitting within 4 walls is required to be learning. We saw it loud and clear during the pandemic. There was learning loss at the primary grades mainly, not so much learning loss at the high school and junior high level, but that's where the grades tanked. Why is that? Because the work stopped getting done. So we have got to stop equating work being done equal learning. Learning does not require a worksheet, doesn't require a course. It's supposed to be an experience, and the curiosity has been beaten out of the learning experience through not exclusively, but let's be honest, No Child Left Behind didn't help the love of learning either. So once we get through that, and I think people are also taking a look at the value of a piece of paper from a diploma from a university or like an Ivy League and all that. So I started thinking about it like this. If you have ChatGPT or you have Copilot, all those AI tools, and we're now connoisseuring about being able to get instant knowledge. We have a Google in our pocket. Why in the world does it make sense to go $100,000 in debt to pack up and go get a room on campus in Massachusetts to get these notes that are in somebody's filing cabinet because this person was the smartest person on a subject, right? All that knowledge is there on the internet and with AI. So this whole physical moving to campus, I think is going to be a thing of the past, or it's at least going to change very, very differently. And so what are we doing about that in Bunker Hill? Well, we're not doing anything about, obviously students moving to Massachusetts, but we're actually looking at that as like, this is the time to say, this is why we need to look long and hard at our community colleges. So in Bunker Hill, we're doing a grant now for birth to 3. So we've got kids right now we have kids from the age of 3 through 12th grade, right? So we're doing birth to 3, and then we're also opening up a classroom next year for grades 13 and 14. This is to bring kids from Lewis and Clark to come back to Bunker Hill 1 day a week and get checked in with somebody. Because we know what happens when you're in K-12, you don't do homework, you get behind. People will nudge you. They will, they'll nudge you. They'll call you. It doesn't necessarily happen at college. I don't know. I'm not saying it doesn't happen at Lewis and Clark, but we're going to make sure that those 13 and 14 grades. So I guess that's the end of the day. That's what we're doing at Bunker Hill. We're looking at this eventual 20-year goal of having somebody involved in learning in this whole learning community from the age of birth to the age of 20, grade 14.
Thank you, Todd, very much. Thank you. I'll hold my comments on all this till the end, but I appreciate those insights. So let's move Patrick and then Brad, right? What I said.
So I'm going to take this a little different angle when it comes to how we think about, I'm going to call it saving education, for lack of a better word. But, I think for years we've prepared students in our K-12 and pre-K-12 environment, and then we've sent them off to whatever their next endeavor is, and almost with a pat on the back and a wish you the best of luck, work hard, and keep your chin up, right? And then we've never really done anything to make sure that they were successful beyond that. And what I equate it to is, in any K-12 system, if you talk about math sequencing, every K-12 system has a very solid sequence for what happens in 7th grade, what happens in 8th grade, what happens in 9th grade, and how that leads you into different opportunities. But then again, we go to graduation and we pat them on the back and send them out the door. And so I think it's our responsibility as superintendents, as educators, and I'm talking about now everybody in the call, to try to figure out how do we help students figure out their path and then give them the foundational skills and scaffold for them into whatever that next path is. So I think partnerships with community college, with four-year higher ed, with our workforce developers, with industry partners, I think it's never been more important than it is today. And that's where I see kind of the trajectory changing, because I do think four-year universities are going to continue whether you move to Massachusetts or not. But we are going to see more students go into other fields and be very successful citizens and neighbors next door, which is what we want to see, right? And so what do we need to do on our end to just give them the foundational skills to move forward?
Thank you, Patrick. So Brad, let's go ahead and end with you, and then I'm going to actually just kind of kick it out to the audience for some questions here. We're at about 3:18. So again, like I said at the beginning, if we go a little over, if those of you who have to jump off, that's totally cool. I get it, but we'll go from there. We'll see where it ends. So Brad, why don't you kind of wrap this one up for us, and then I'll open it up to the audience.
Yeah, first I'm going to clear up that my good friend Todd there, we do not have any kitty litter in any restrooms up here in Jersey either. I'd prefer not to have any social media posts or any emails on that topic. I have plenty to deal with. In regards to the question, I think I'm just going to go to change. I agree with what Patrick's saying. Our job is to make this, we bring in these young people. I'm like Todd. We've got them very young, well before kindergarten, and then we pat them on the back when they're leaving as graduates. And we want them to be productive citizens. And I think we got really caught up, and I hate to keep beating this drum, in that they all had to go to a four-year school and they all had to be whatever that meant. And change has happened because we have to have all these other workforce areas are are just devastated with no one in them, including the teaching profession. And, you know, I'm just going to say that I feel really good. Jill talked about that, grow your own. We have this EDUC 231 that we're running right now. And what I love most about it is I've got kids in classrooms. We've got multiple kids going to read all throughout the district. I probably had 50 or more kids last semester reading in different classrooms throughout our buildings, our 6 buildings in the district. But I also had Calhoun kids and Greene County kids take this grow your own class here. And that's the challenge that I keep, that Ken and I even talk about occasionally on, you know, everybody can't get to campus. What can we do? How can we change? How can we get instructors outside of that campus? And I think this is really, really important if we're gonna talk about this. It's not just change for K-12, it's change for the community college as well. I'll leave it at that.
All right. Thank you, Brad. Thank you. So with that being said, I know I'm still trying to get back on. I don't know, something's up with the internet here at my house, but I want to kind of give everyone a chance in the audience maybe to just pause for a second. And if you have any questions, please ask. You can ask those, you know, just ask them straight out. Or if you want to post them in the chat, you can. If you do post them in the chat, I'm going to ask if Sue Keener, who I know was on, could just help kind of moderate that till I get back on. I think I'm pretty close. So I can't see the screen. So if there are questions, please just go ahead and ask those, and we'll try to manage that. We'll maybe take 5 or 10 minutes or so of questions, and then we'll have some final thoughts at the end. And if we do go a little longer, that's fine. But again, I'll leave that up to you if you have to jump off. So any questions at this point?
Yeah, and this is Tony Furman. I don't have a question, but I do have an opportunity of something that's going on. So we received a federal grant, apprenticeship grant in the St. Louis region. And one of the areas that we have is education, healthcare, bioscience. We thought education was going to be sort of the tail of the dog. It has become the dog. Part of this now is that McKendree University has developed the first teacher apprenticeship program in the state of Illinois. We have several school districts interested in St. Clair County. Also, UMSL has developed a similar program over on the St. Louis side of the river. The McKendree one is, there's 2 apprenticeships, there's paraprofessionals, and then there's also elementary education. Also, I do know that ISB is looking at a special education apprenticeship as well. So things are happening in that area, sort of on the non-traditional side. If anyone's interested in the McKendree program, their credit hours usually are about $1,200 a credit hour. For this program, they're offering it for about $330 a credit hour. So I would just say if any of the superintendents are interested in learning more, if you reach out to me at our office, and I can get you with the people that are administering the grant for us to get you more information and connect it with McKendree.
Hey, thank you, Tony. So I had to go to my personal laptop here, so I'm back. Any other questions? I don't see anything in the chat. And I know this isn't a shy group, but just, you know, I mean, it's Friday afternoon, it's cold out, but any final thoughts or questions, please just go ahead and ask.
Yeah, Dr. T, this is Travis Jumper, run the welding technology program here at Lewis and Clark. I threw 3 questions in the chat, mainly around career and tech ed and workforce education, but like, where do you guys as superintendents see the role of career and tech ed and workforce at the high school level? And then kind of to follow that up, where do you anticipate having issues hiring instructors that are qualified? And then can I kind of tap that off as how can we at the community college level assist you in that career and tech ed and workforce kind of mentality?
So Travis, I'll jump in that because we've got kids that we're sending to Lewis and Clark for welding. So I'm going to start with the second question. Absolutely. Certification, it continues to be a challenge. And finding certificated teachers to teach programs in any of the CTE areas continues to be a challenge, at least for Edwardsville, and I'm assuming it is for my colleagues as well. So I think partnerships with community colleges are huge. I do see some loosening from ISB in terms of finding certified people, but also partnering with community colleges to offer dual credit opportunities. And, one of the things I hear a lot from parents is we spend a lot of time getting kids ready for the four-year university or college or whatever it is. When they were 14, they knew they wanted to be a fill in the blank, electrician, welder, whatever it is. We need to teach them the skills they need to be a successful fill in the blank. And that's not necessarily a dig at any of our AP courses or anything like that. I think it's really about, again, going back to kind of what Ken said, listening to our kids and listening to our clientele and saying, hey, our clientele is telling us what they want. It's our job to provide it for them and find that pathway for them. So I think those partnerships are going to be crucial. And Ken and Dr. Trzaska and I have been working on several different things going on where we've expanded some of the programming offerings. I know we've got some work going on at CAVC with Brad that's going to expand some of those opportunities. So I think that's just going to grow. I don't think that's going to stifle at all. And you're muted.
Sorry. Thanks, Patrick. Do you have anything else, Dr. Jump?
I would probably just say.
Go ahead.
I would probably just say along the same lines. I think we're fighting those restraints. We have lots of kids. We have more kids that want to take these courses than we have available for them. And then we also throw in, oh, you got to take 2 years of Spanish. Well, guess what that kid's not taking? If he's not on track to graduate and he's taking 2 years of Spanish, then he's not taking some of these things that he's probably going to want to do. So we're fighting those challenges. And Jill said it eloquently earlier about how she was fighting that in Springfield. I mean, there's lots of agencies, whether it's IASA or other groups, that all have lobbyists and doing what we can to get that. I use the example as I've got a neighbor across the street from me that graduated from the University of Illinois, was a businessman for years. He wanted to volunteer. He retired in his 40s, if that gives you an idea, after he took a couple of things public, and he wanted to teach business. ISB would not let him teach business. You know where he's teaching right now? 3 days a week in Geese Business School at University of Illinois, but he couldn't teach at Jersey 100. And so we have our problems, and I know you guys have your accreditation and some problems as well. I think we got to continue to band together and fight those issues.
Yep.
I would just add to what both of my colleagues have said, and I think we need to find ways to work together collectively, whether that's through that CBE pathway, whether that's through certifications. I think we as public educators need to advocate for a higher rate of dual enrollment kickback to the local colleges so that you guys see more benefits from that. And I think that if we can figure out ways to really whet the appetite of the student when they're with us, and then they continue on and you expand that. So I'm going to think about Travis in the situation we have. If we have a CTE teacher that's just really whetting their appetite about welding and they're not sophisticated enough in their own understanding to really teach welding, let us start that and help get them engaged in welding and potentially, work on an internship at Westar or something like that. And then they continue on with you, Travis, and go much deeper into welding and more sophisticated types of welds. And that's not just welding, it's everything. And so I think the way I see this going is I would love to see our higher, I would love to see secondary and post-secondary doing a better job in the future of eliminating some of those boundaries. And I think Brad talked about that with certification. Like, I don't know that a teacher has to have a master's degree in early childhood to teach in the Grow Your Own program. And so, like, how can we work with those types of situations and remove boundaries so we can create pathways that start with us but finish with you? And so, and then advocate at a local level and at the state level so that you get a larger kickback for dual credit opportunities that you're providing to our students, because I just want us to go at it as a team, I think is how I see it.
Thank you, Jill. There was another question in the box here that just popped up for me. Let's see, well, actually two now. I asked everyone to repost, but anyway, this is from Meliska Meski. So what role do you need business and industry to fulfill regarding the state of education? What are some of the things that could make the most impact? the WBL opportunities. Opportunities are obvious, but what might be less obvious? So what opportunities do all of you see there on this sort of this business and industry side? And maybe Brad, that's a
let me jump in here. One of the things that I really believe, and I tell our Jersey County businesses, I challenge them. I go to meetings once a month. They have to be involved. They have to want our students to build a relationship before they take off to get whatever training it is. If they want to see them potentially come back and work in their, whether it be banks or welding shops or whatever it is. And so I just think businesses need to get as involved as they can, be proactive in internships, whether they're paid or not, want shadowing, want these kids in your place of business if you want them to consider you once they get the training done. And I can't emphasize that enough.
Thank you. Anyone else on the panel want to take that one? And then there's one other question from Andrew Carrington, which I can also lend some point of view on. So Andrew's question is around internal studies plan to address challenges posed by emerging artificial intelligence, technology tools such as ChatGPT, and what new educational skills might be required by students as these new tools mature. So any thoughts from the panel on that of what sort of exercises or approaches you're taking at the high school or even pre-high school level to begin to prepare not only your teachers and your support teams around your teachers, but your students as it relates to AI?
I would just say real quick, and I know my colleagues are going to have something on this, but I went to a 3-day training on AI this summer. It was very interesting because the gentleman that was speaking said, are your teachers using AI? And most of us said no at that point. And I don't think our staff was, but he said, it was really interesting. He said, well, I promise you, your students are already using it and your teachers don't even know it, because they can go create whatever it is and then put it in Google translate it to Spanish and then to German and then back to English. And AI can't even catch that it was an AI created document. And so I would just say, I said that on the first day to the Jersey 100 employees. Since then, we've had multiple PDs. Every day that we have a chance, we have PD on how they can use this, how they can engage with this, how they can help students. And, there's a fear that it's going to take a lot of jobs. And it was interesting because in that 3-day thing, they said, you know what, it's not going to take jobs. It's going to change jobs, and the people that aren't astute to this are going to be out, and it's the direction of the future. So that's what I have to say on it.
Thanks, Brad. Anyone else want to jump in on that one? And I'd say one of the things Ron Wall, who's our kind of our interim director right now of technology. So we talked a little bit before the break, and we sort of made this announcement at the all-team meeting late in December. But what we want to do, and I think we've got to go over the list next week. I think we've got 15 or so. Maybe we'll get more, but we're going to put together basically an AI experimental group where we're gonna give up to, let's say, 20 team members access to whether it's ChatGPT, et cetera, and just allow them to work with it across the semester, and then really sort of help us better understand how did it work, in the context of whether you're a faculty member, whether you're working, in admissions, whether you're a coach in athletics. I mean, and then coming up with just sort of what you saw as the challenges and what you saw as the opportunities it could present. And then allowing that perhaps to inform some of our own policies and practices as it relates to AI. Because, I think you make a great point, Brad. I don't think that AI is going to sort of be this indictment on our work and on the integrity of our work that perhaps everyone's thought it would be. It's really going to become, if we allow it to become as well, let me say that, become more of a complement, or kind of like, I think as Microsoft put it very, very well, the co-pilot, let it become our co-pilot. Let it become that technology next to us. Oftentimes, like our phones are, next to us all the time, kind of this support system. It helps inform us, it helps keep us advised on what's happening, but at the end of the day, we as human beings, right, are responsible for the ultimate work. So I'm excited about that, and it's prompted me to, again, the way my darn mind works is maybe that's an opportunity where we can have some cross-pollination between high schools and maybe Lewis and Clark to come up with, hey, because a lot of times we're working together. Our students are your students are our students. So how are we creating environments across this AI spectrum that might make more sense for us to collaborate on? So something else to think about. So another question from Maya. Earlier in the panel discussion, we discussed the importance of culture, building a sense of belonging, and students who may have missed out on some social things due to COVID from a DEI perspective. How are your school districts prepping your students to interact with other cultures in the workforce or at 2- or 4-year institutions? So who wants to, any thoughts on that from the panel?
I'm gonna brag on our learning lab again. We do a lot of SEL interactions with our students at both the middle school and the high school level, and many times that's just trying to get them in a position, whether it be home life or interacting with their their students and disagreements and all those different things. I just feel like it's been a wonderful thing. It was maneuvering of resources that I thought was very, very, very important. We have a social worker in every building now, and they're very busy. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Brian. Any other thoughts on that question?
I'll just jump in. I think this is an ongoing goal for every school district, at least it is for us. And while we have a diverse student body, we also have students that up until they come to middle school are from pretty homogeneous backgrounds. A lot of times because our primary schools aren't as diverse as our secondary schools, just because of the size. So I think providing opportunities for student interaction, providing opportunities for students to find their place, but yet also then be exposed to things that they're not, I'm gonna call it comfortable with, because that's really, it's about becoming comfortable with people who aren't like you. And that's what we're constantly looking for at the middle school and high school level, is how do we just get students exposed and understanding how you interact with people who don't have the background you're from or who don't look like you.
Thanks, Patrick. Okay, so with that being said, I know we're a little bit over, but I do want to thank everyone. I think if anything comes out of these sorts of discussions, it's the fact that we have so many great things happening within our own institutions, but at the same time, it's that philosophy that betterment is this labor of perpetualness, or as I like to say, betterment is a perpetual labor. I mean, Atul Gawande said it, but I'll say it sort of my own way. And every day we got to get a little better, right, at what we're doing and what we're trying to create as organizational leaders and also as team members. I know we had a great group today with you all as panelists. We had, I think, an amazing audience out there interested in what's not only happening in our institutions, but really where those collaborations can continue to be enhanced and sort of bring us to that next level. So I'm going to hold up this book. It's a 2010 book. It's kind of, I think to admit to everyone, it kind of prompted a lot of how I started to rethink of education. But if you haven't read this book it's by Mark Taylor. It's called Crisis on Campus. I think it focuses on really 4-year institutions, but it alludes to K through 12. It alludes to community colleges. And he sort of made this sort of prediction of what's going to happen with education. And it's interesting, although his data is a little bit off in terms of what the cost of education would be, over time. And he's suggesting in 2034 to 35, 1 year of college is going to be about $200,000. I think he's probably off on that a little bit, because this year he predicted it to be about $119,000. But beyond cost, he talks a lot about what's really happening, kind of what's the inside work going on in our institutions. And ultimately that this work that happens inside the institutions is the work that ultimately is going to allow us to thrive. If the work in our institutions is happening in order to make us these survivors, then ultimately we're going to fail, not only ourselves, but I think our students and those communities that really depend on us. So I would suggest everyone sort of pick this up. I always have extra copies, but he says in the beginning of the book, and I'm going to end with this because I think this is sort of a culmination, and it's a quote, very simple quote by Friedrich Nietzsche. You know, you might be a fan, you might not, but it's pretty straightforward. All things are intertwined, enmeshed, enamored. So our work requires everyone's work to work, if that makes sense. So we have to stay connected to one another, keep pushing each other to be better. And I think this panel is the beginning of additional conversations I'd like to have, not only with superintendents across our district, but with other leaders in our region and across our state. I know a few of you are already booked on the podcast in a couple of weeks, and that's going to be an amazing discussion. They were going to dig a lot deeper, probably get a little bit more on the edge of some of this stuff. But ultimately, I as my team knows, I want to challenge everyone to be their best version each day. To serve our students at the highest level requires us to be that. With that being said, I want to thank everyone again, really from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for hanging out with us a little bit this afternoon. Thank you, Jill, for all that you do, not only as a superintendent, but also your leadership on our board. Todd, thank you for being another amazing superintendent who's out there kind of pushing those limits. And I think advocating like I've really not seen anyone do for your students, and for taking on some of the challenges that I know you've taken on based on conversations you and I've had. Brad, thanks for being really remarkable at all you do. Appreciate your efforts. You continue to push, I think, myself and Lewis and Clark to see opportunities that perhaps we're not seeing as clearly. So thank you, and thank your leadership group for that. And Patrick, thank you as well. It's been amazing getting to know you. I think the work you're doing in Edwardsville is like looking so far futuristic that I'm inspired. So thank you for all that you're doing as well. And I'm happy to be part of it. So thank you all again. You are all each remarkable in your own way. Appreciate your time, your energy, your wisdom, your education. And I think most importantly, you're just great leadership. Have a great weekend, everyone. Stay. I was going to say stay cool, but I'm going to stay warm and just stay cool in a figurative way, right? So thank you all so much. Be well, and look forward to seeing everyone next week. Cheers, everyone.